Al Lewis, Firearms 104, Final Project.
This is the 24th of June, 2022, and we've come to the part you've all been waiting for. The complete, nearly, disassemble of my Model 1895 Nagant revolver. As always, we're going to ensure that the weapon is clear of any ammunition before we begin. As you can see, it is. First, we pull the ejector rod forward and then rotate it towards the right side of the frame. We need to align the gap in the retention ring with the ears of the cylinder access pin so that it can be freely removed. Well, mostly freely. Once that's clear, we open the loading gate and the cylinder should simply come right out of the frame. This access pin bushing is what we remove next, by turning the bushing until it pops loose from the cylinder. It's spring-loaded, so we need to keep a secure grip on it. After that, the spring should just come right off the pin bushing. Next, we'll need to remove the loading gate, which is done with a single screw pin. The gate is spring tensioned by this flat spring, which we'll remove next with another single screw. Now it's time to remove the side plate, which is held on by yet another single screw. This screw pin is special though, and we'll need to make sure we keep track of it during the disassembly and reassembly. The side plate should now be free to come off towards the left of the firearm. I say should be, but it can be stubborn sometimes. No worries though, as I have just the thing. A very fine-bladed screwdriver can be carefully used to break the side plate seal with the frame. You definitely want to be careful to only put as much pressure as you must to make it pop loose. There it goes. The grip panels are removed from the inside on these revolvers, starting with this screw which will allow us to remove the middle piece. And this one just revealed allows us to remove the outside panel. The nut inserts in the panel can also be removed, but I found that these were very well set in place, so I didn't want to risk cracking the wood to remove what is likely a part that will never need to be removed anyway. Now we get to the interior of the M1895's lockwork, which is amazingly simple considering the action's technical complexity. The first step to removing the guts is to cock the hammer. Now, remember when I said that side plate pin would be special? Well, here's why. That pin screws into a special hole just above the mainspring to prevent it from flying off during disassembly. Pretty clever trick by Mr. Nagant if you ask me. The hammer can then be slid out of the frame by releasing the sear with the trigger and giving it just a bit of tension. As you see, the mainspring is still held in place. Now ordinarily you would remove the top pin to take the firing pin out. However, I found that this pin is very tight and didn't want to budge even with a proper anvil and punch set, so we'll just leave it there. The double action sear and V-spring, however, are easily removed with a screw. Moving right along, the trigger and hand can simply be slid off the frame at this point, and the hand simply pops right out of the trigger with no resistance. To remove that mainspring, we'll need to loosen and lower the trigger guard. This screw will allow the trigger guard to pivot downward, releasing the tension on the mainspring. Both can then simply be lifted up and out, and the trigger guard screw removed as well. For posterity, we'll remove the side plate screw. Next to come out is this cartridge support block, which simply slides down and out. After that, the cylinder locking lever pivots backwards and can be slid out. Almost there. Next we remove the other grip panel, again from the inside of the frame. This lanyard loop screws into the base of the grip. However, it is held in place by a pin. I've driven this pin out before, however it is very difficult to drive, and I already bent one brass punch doing so in a previous disassembly, so I'm going to leave it in place this time. Ordinarily, the pin is removed, the lanyard loop is simply unscrewed, and then the grip cap can be driven off the base of the frame. The barrel and ejector rod assembly would ordinarily be unscrewed from the frame and further stripped. However, I don't have a proper barrel wrench, so I'm just going to leave it where it's at. Now we get to put all the Legos back together. Installation, as they say, is the reverse of removal. Grip panel and screw. Cylinder lock. Cartridge support. Take note of the grooves here to make sure they're on the proper side. Trigger guard and mainspring. You'll want to partially install the trigger guard screw so that you can compress the mainspring and leave a hand free to turn the screwdriver. Remember that side plate pin? Here it is again. The mainspring has a peg at the V-point that fits in this little hole in the frame. Compress with one hand and tighten the screw. Hand into the trigger, trigger into the frame. Eventually. This tab on the trigger slides back and forth in this groove in the cartridge support and is what moves it into place as the hammer cocks. Time to reassemble the hammer. The V-spring goes in first, point down, and short leaf towards the front. Double action sear goes in next, and as you can see it has an angled surface that matches the cutout on the hammer's body. Screw it into place. Whoops, gotta make sure that spring is fully in the groove. Much better. Now the hammer goes back in the frame, and make sure that the trigger tab goes in between the two sear surfaces. You'll probably have to give the trigger a little tension to make sure it lines up right. Now we can remove the side plate pin again. Time to put the side plate back together. Outside panel first. Followed by the inside panel. The side plate should pop back into place once these pegs are lined up properly. Once again, I say should. Sometimes it needs a little finagling. That's a technical term. The magic side plate pin goes back in to secure it. The loading gate spring goes back on next. Little too tight. That's better. Next is the loading gate itself. Spring slides back onto the cylinder access pin. Now take a close look here. See how the pin has a little nub and the cylinder has a little cutout? Well, that's how the access pin is retained. Line the two up and slide them in, then rotate the pin to lock it into place. Slide the cylinder into the frame. Move the ejector rod into place and slide the access pin home. Collapse the rod and we're good to go. Yep, still clear. Single action works fine. And so does double action. Mission successful. See you on the next one.